The Checkpoint is presented by GM Pharma, the first international multinational pharmaceutical company in Georgia. GM Pharma, to serve those who need it most.
IDS Borjomi has published a statement stating that the owner of the company is ready to transfer part of the shares to the Georgian government free of charge. According to the statement, this step will make it possible to resume the production process and launch the plant, which has been suspended for several weeks. The reason was the sanctioning of the company shareholder Mikhail Friedman, due to which the accounts of Borjomi were frozen. Enterprise Georgia has been awarded a prize for its export assistance and support components at the WTPO Awards 2020 of the International Trade Center ITC. The competition is created and organized by the International Trade Center, a joint agency of the United Nations and the World Trade Organization WTO. As the winner of the previous competition, Enterprise Georgia was also part of the jury for this year's competition. Koba Gvenetadze, governor of the National Bank of Georgia, participated in a hybrid event that was organized by the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and the National Bank of Kazakhstan. The governor spoke with the participants about the survey that the IMF has published on regional economic outlook for the Middle East and Central Asia. Koba Gvenetadze discussed the economic challenges facing the region and focused on inflation and the impact of the normalization of the U.S. monetary policy. And this is The Checkpoints, authored and anchored by me, I'm Elena Gvanchilashvili, and the Checkpoints team is ready to start the show. This week, Tbilisi hosted the Georgia-Austrian Business Forum, and B2B meetings between the businesses of both countries have been held.
We are celebrating 30 years of diplomatic relations between Austria and Georgia, and 30 years of diplomatic relations also mean 30 years of economic relations, and those relations have developed quite dynamically. But of course the COVID pandemic has created quite a dip, and we want to use the opportunity of this anniversary to discuss with our Georgian friends how we can deepen our economic relations, how we can re-engage, how we can restart our economies after the COVID crisis. We have a very important trade mission here. High-ranking representatives of the Austrian business community are here in Georgia to have B2B talks with their counterparts, and they're all sitting in here now, and we're trying to discuss not only what was good in what we did in the past, but also how we can explore our potential in the future. Because, as I just said, inside Austria and Georgia are a natural fit. We are countries of a similar size, same topography. We have mountains, so there's quite a number of natural points of departure where we can intensify our cooperation. And that's the goal of this meeting today.
I think we are getting back to business forums in Georgia, which is quite significant. And it's an annual event, so we used to host this kind of event at least twice per year. And now Austrian delegation is represented by very interesting sectors, such as hydroelectric powers, tourism sector, also we have packaging sector. So I think there is a very big interest from Georgian business. As you can see, there is quite a lot of businesses represented, and such events have quite significant impact on trade economic relations between countries. And I think it's a very good, let's say, it's a very significant event that it's live. Because while pandemic had very destructive effects regarding face-to-face communication between business, our members, we have more than 3,000 members, and it demonstrates that they miss this live face-to-face communication. While online communication is still very significant, quite a lot of business ties are made here on the spot during this face-to-face meeting. So I think this particular business forum will have a long-lasting effect, which will further contribute to trade economic relations, cultural integration, and we always used to say that if there is even small portion of contracts made between these companies, it has a very big impact if you take into general scope, because 1, 2, 3 success stories attract 10, 20 more. So these small steps are very significant in case of this big picture.
First of all, I am indeed delighted to be here wearing no mask and seeing people actually smile in person. And I do think that interpersonal touch is something that's very, very important. Events like this bring businesses from Europe, Austria, and Georgia together, and I think are critical for Georgia's future growth. The ability to transfer knowledge, share experiences, look for investment opportunities, I think will greatly benefit Georgia, and if I may also say, investors abroad as well, to learn from the Georgian experience. And so it is with this, and I'm pleased to be here at this event that organized by the Austrian Embassy to celebrate 30 years of the embassy here in Georgia.
Business forums are always very important because you bring the people together. And after this long COVID time, it's more important because the people want to speak to each other, see each other, and so on. And then, online you can do a lot of things, but it's important that you sit down on a table, look into the eyes, drink a tea, and from there you can only develop business. Business is a people business. And that's why we are very happy to have 15 companies again. And I can feel already that they are developing projects, and this is very nice to see.
The Austrian delegation comprised up to 15 Austrian company representatives from different sectors. I attended the business forum and will tell you more in detail about the expectations, challenges and perspectives that both Georgian and Austrian businesses see in terms of cooperation, exports and investment. Both Georgian and Austrian chambers of commerce see certain sectors as more appealing to doing business in Georgia.
The Austrian company is active in many sectors and many are also active in Georgia. We heard about the regional development and tourism and agriculture. And from the one side we have this Austrian Development Agency and the Austrian businesses who have ideas. And we have in a concrete way 2 companies here. We're doing applications for regional tourism development to make it more interesting for tourists. And so this is really in a very concrete stage already, so I'm very optimistic. But we also have hydropower companies who are here, machinery, equipment sellers. So there are quite a few who are trying to develop new projects here.
Let us be more precise. What are some of the sectors of the economy that you see that have the most growth potential with these ties, better trade ties with Austria?
I think we have several companies represented from hydroelectric power sector, and it is very significant, especially taking into account the political situation and encouragement of small hydroelectric powers in Georgia, because it is very significant aspect of energetic independence overall. And there is quite a lot of Georgian companies that demonstrated interest, and here we have both analytics and intellectual property as well as technical part of it. So I think it has a very big potential to introduce high quality consultants and technology into Georgia, especially in view of, as I said, significance to the energetic independence of Georgia overall.
However, for doing business in Georgia, Austrian investors have their preconditions. Here are some ideas on what could make Georgia's business environment more appealing.
We are celebrating 30 years of diplomatic relations between Austria and Georgia. And 30 years of diplomatic relations also mean 30 years of economic relations, and those relations have developed quite dynamically. But of course the COVID pandemic has created quite a dip, and we want to use the opportunity of this anniversary to discuss with our Georgian friends how we can deepen our economic relations, how we can re-engage, how we can restart our economies after the COVID crisis. We have a very important trade mission here. High-ranking representatives of the Austrian business community are here in Georgia to have B2B talks with their counterparts, and they're all sitting in here now, and we're trying to discuss not only what was good in what we did in the past, but also how we can explore our potential in the future. Because, as I just said, inside Austria and Georgia are a natural fit. We are countries of a similar size, same topography. We have mountains, so there's quite a number of natural points of departure where we can intensify our cooperation, and that's the goal of this meeting today.
What are some of the sectors of the economy where you see the potential growth?
Well, one thing that comes to my mind obviously is tourism. And tourism infrastructure. I mean, as I said, mountainous regions, cable cars, hotels, sustainable mountain tourism. These are all areas where we are engaged, Austrian businesses, but also the Austrian Development Corporation. And this is an area where we can still strengthen and where also Georgia needs to recover from the COVID crisis. Other areas include energy, logistics, but we have also some Austrian brands here that are represented. So it's quite a broad portfolio and quite a huge potential.
Yes, and one more question, please. Sorry. This first the pandemic and now this Russia's devastating war in Ukraine has been real tough on trade. So, what are some of the must-haves in economy for Austrian businesses and Georgian businesses to really have win-win situation in this trade relations?
Well, as you pointed out, I mean, I mentioned before the COVID crisis, but also, of course, the war in Ukraine has created a lot of anxiety and insecurity, and this is something that we need to overcome. When you talk about what is important for us, I think talking to Austrian companies, there are mainly two things. First of all, they need a skilled labor force. This is an area where we need to cooperate, can cooperate. And the second one is, and you will not be surprised because this is a message that the EU constantly gives, is we need rule of law, reliable judiciary. This is important for a good business environment.
But I think in general also what we see is that they're looking for stability, political stability, predictability in the economic policies, and as Georgia is a very liberal country and is moving towards the EU and we have good laws here, so I think this is a very good precondition for Austrian companies to do business here.
The Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister of Economy and Sustainable Development, Levan Davitashvili, tried to reinforce this very precondition for Austrian businesses in his quite a long address speech. I will try to summarize the most important points that Mr. Davitashvili shared with the audience.
The EU integration process will also support cooperation and strengthening of our friendly relations between Austria and Georgia. As you all are aware, in March, Georgia applied to EU membership and already submitted answers to EU questionnaire. The EU candidate status will be prerequisite for more integration of Georgia to EU, and of course it will help and contribute a lot development policies, increasing connectivity, which will of course unlock new opportunities for Georgia's economy.
The Minister of Economy also shared the main policy priorities of Georgia with the Austrian guests and business community, assuring them that these reforms would make the business environment even more appealing for doing business in Georgia.
The main economic policy direction of Georgia is to support the strengthening of international economic relations with EU countries, to redirect trade and investment flows from Russia to EU and US, of course. Recently visited the United States. We raised a very important topic to continue negotiation on free trade. And hopefully we can progress in this direction and of course use at maximum level our free trade and free and comprehensive trade agreement with the European Union. Recently, Enterprise Georgia has launched a very important export assistance complex program to support Georgian businesses to increase export capacity. This is co-financing so-called like marketing activities in like entry fees, other kind of marketing activities, listing, licensing, certification costs, etc., etc. Our trade turnover is not impressive, and I think that with Austria we have definitely bigger potential to increase trade. Export is really very low, but I think that Georgia has a number of products which can be identified and further promoted to be exported to Austria. From Austria we have around 60 million US dollar export to Georgia, and here as well I see potential to increase in all directions. This can be industrial products, consumer products, etc. For ensuring productivity enhancement and structural improvement of our economy, Several structural reforms are now in a process in the medium term. These are comprehensive reform of state-owned enterprises, development of the capital market. These are my priority areas. Improving information technology, IT sector in general, IT infrastructure with special priority, of course, on digitalization and digital development, not digital transformation, but continuous digital development of the country.
Digital development is a goal that is also supported by the World Bank. Its regional director, Sebastian Molenius, says new reform priorities will help Georgia maintain and even enhance the resilience of the country's economy.
Much of what we do at the World Bank is to enable private sector-led growth. For that to occur, that means that the private sector has to be vibrant. So we work with government to make sure that there's an appropriate investment climate, that businesses can operate freely here, that you have strong competition, strong market-based and rule-based system, justice system, etc. These are all things that we have been supporting Georgia with for over 30 years now. And I can safely say that there's a very strong investment and a business climate here in Georgia that allows for this very dynamic growth to occur that we see here. If you look at the last 10 years, pre-COVID, Georgia averaged over 5% of growth. That's one of the highest growth rates in the whole Europe and Central Asia region. To my mind, one of the great reasons of that is because of the very progressive policies that allows the private sector to thrive here in Georgia.
Yeah, and now looking at the current landscape of doing business, first because of pandemic and now because Russia's devastating war in Ukraine, and also these sanctions that are imposed on Russia, which is one of the largest neighbors and also one of the largest enemies of this country. How do you think will these sanctions imposed on Russia in the long run be beneficial for Georgia in terms of diversity? As a booster for diversification of this of its market?
So first of all, I think one has to acknowledge Georgia has gone through a very series of shocks. First of all, the COVID-19 pandemic that has had a profound impact on Georgia, and now the current war in Ukraine and the sanctions regime that is imposed against Russia. I think all countries surrounding Russia right now are seeing their economies contract. We are downgrading almost all of the growth projections that we have had for all the countries, again, in the former CIS. Now, with that said, the first quarter here in Georgia has seen some very impressive growth. So we at the bank, in fact, will probably upgrade our growth projections sometime in June, because the Georgian economy has in fact shown itself to be very, very resilient. So growth has been over 10%. Even if we assume 0% growth for the last 3 quarters, we anticipate growth will be above 3%, which again is very, very strong, and it could even increase because I think it's going to be more than 0% over the last 3 quarters. So overall, again, Georgia's economy has been battle tested, I think has withstood the test of time, and I think that with sound government policies, we will see strong growth for this year as well.
And the focus on market diversification, because right now, for example, we had this competition agency report. I don't know if you have seen it yet, and they are saying that in order for the fuel prices to be decreased in Georgia, one market to look for is Russian market.
So look, I think one has to recognize Georgia is a small country and hence a small economy. It is as such vital for Georgia to be integrated with its neighbors. Now, I think it is prudent policy to have a sound strategy of diversification. That means we're trading with its partners here in the South Caucasus. That means trading with Turkey. That means trading with the European Union and China. Fortunately, Georgia has a number of trade deals already in place. And so as a result, I think it is a sound strategy to be as diversified as possible, in particular as one country, such as Russia right now, is going through a sanctions regime and where trading is going to prove to be more difficult.
This optimism with the economic growth and also the emphasis on the diversification of markets is shared by the government of Georgia. What the Austrian business community heard from the Minister of Economy, Levan Davitashvili, was this.
After the economic contraction by 6.8% in 2020, last year, Georgian economic recovery has gained surprising momentum, and growth amounted 10.4%. of real GDP growth, and real GDP actually exceeded pre-pandemic level by 2.9%. However, war between Russia and Ukraine is significantly slowing down economic recovery trends globally. Despite challenging environment, promising trends continued in Georgia's economy. In 2022, we see that March and April figures are promising. Based on preliminary estimates, economic growth in January-March was around 14.4%, which is very impressive double-digit growth figure. In January-April 2022, export decreased by 32.8%, so it's also a very impressive figure, and amounted to 1.587 billion US dollars. Recovery rate in tourist revenues is also as it's been planned during the actual beginning of this year. We have 70% of recovery of tourist revenues up to now, and 50% of number of travelers in 2022 compared to 2019 level, which was actually historic peak in Georgia's tourism industry. The growing global uncertainty in the wake of Russia and Ukraine war is of course a significant challenge for the global economy, including of course Georgia's economy. And since Ukraine and Russia both are important partners in trade and important source of our foreign currency inflows, we assume that that would affect of course income of Georgian economy. However, based on already observed promising tendencies, we expect that economic growth in Georgia in 2022 will still perform over IFI's projection. We are focusing on our economic policy agenda on maintaining macroeconomic stability and, of course, strengthening medium-term growth potential. And according to IMF, Georgia will ensure fastest economic growth in the region in medium term. In 2022-2027, among regional and European countries, we will have highest economic growth. It will be 5.5%, which will be supported by, of course, infrastructural spending, FDI inflows, structural reforms, and of course our focus on increasing productivity. Despite this significant progress and successfully implemented economic policy reforms, significant challenges still remain, which of course shall be addressed from our side. And in order to advance the country's economic performance and potential of economic growth, we should be mobilized and focused on our growth agenda. In order to decline external imbalances, government intends to widen Georgia's export base, diversify its export geography. Of course, foreign investment inflows are very important. We have to decrease dependence on Russian export and trade with Russia. Improve private sector competitiveness is very important, and of course we need to strengthen trade integration, and this is always priority for Georgia's government. Utilize Georgia's potential as a transit hub is very important, especially we see increased interest in so-called mid-corridor after Russian-Ukraine war.
Diversification from Russia's market is high on the agenda of every single respondent that I have talked to during the Austria-Georgia Business Forum. As you can hear in a few seconds, everyone is anticipating that in the long run, the international sanctions imposed on Russia will play as a booster for more market diversification and more economic independence from Russia.
I want to demonstrate our support to Ukraine, first of all. It had a very big impact on the Black Sea coast. So this particular event, and when we're looking forward to diversification of markets, finding business partners, this can have and will have very significant impact, especially when we're talking about, as I said, the hydroelectric power sector and renewable energy. Also here represented business process outsourcing companies that are looking forward to find operators in Georgia. And here one of the biggest requests is English language. So I think this will further promote high-skilled workers in Georgia that could potentially find work outside of Georgia while still remaining, this intellectual property will remain in Georgia. Also, we have the tourism sector, which is quite significant. And one of the things I want to highlight, this business mission was first in Azerbaijan, now in Georgia. So there is interesting linkages between our countries, which could, serve as a gateway to Europe. Georgia is traditionally, between Europe and Asia. So maybe we could find very interesting linkages between our three countries. And this could also, of course, impact overall business outlook. It's time for Georgian business, and after association agreement, it was a very big kick for Georgian business to look outwards of their traditional markets. And as a Chamber of Commerce, we say the key to Georgian business development is market diversification. It's European markets, stable markets, and many Georgian companies that already found business partners abroad or are conducting their business jointly, they serve as best practices of how can you become independent of external factors, especially when you have a war in Ukraine. This could boost additional interest into European market as a stable market and outlook to the future, I would say.
Considering this Russia's devastating war in Ukraine, considering the international sanctions that are mounting on Russia, and we know that economic sanctions work both ways. So if we look in the long run, would it be more challenges for Europe and Georgia? I mean Georgia with Europe, of course, or could it become a booster also for more economic diversification, for more diversification?
Well, first of all, this terrible war and all the tragedies which we're seeing now in the Ukraine is, of course, not really a catastrophe. But if we see that the companies are looking to do something, they have to look for other possibilities, and we can already see that, for example, trade, there's more trade going through Georgia and on the middle Silk Road, as we already heard, and the companies are saying, yes, this is happening. And we can also see, yes, they're trying to diversify, they're trying to look for new opportunities, and they're coming to Georgia and to see what can we do here if it's not possible in other countries. And so I think if they find good opportunities here, then they will stay here also. So that's why, yes, I'm quite sure that this is an opportunity for all the other countries, unfortunately, because of these tragic things which are happening, that this could develop here.
Another robust focus of Georgia's government, as the Minister of Economy assured the Austrian business community on the business forum, is on FDI and other institutional developments.
We support FDIs, and seeking FDIs remains one of top priorities for the government of Georgia. Production of electronics, auto and aircraft parts, pharmaceuticals, MRO, food processing, BPO, energy, ICT and logistics, these are considered as attractive sectors for FDIs with high growth potential and, of course, main source of export promotion and productivity enhancement. Georgia is one of few countries in the region with the institutions and policies and business climate that have transported the country into the new regional frontier for investment opportunities. Georgia has been ranked 8th place by OECD FDI Regulatory Restrictiveness Index. Georgia's FDI to GDP and FDI per capita is among the highest in the region and highest in European countries. On average, it's 6% of GDP in last 3 years. This is one of the highest among peers, like with the same sovereign rating. Georgia has a launch state program. This is FDI grant to support efficiency-seeking FDIs inflows to the country by co-financing qualified expenses upon the fulfillment of investment obligations. This is 1 million investment grant. Besides new incentives for IT sector, of course, increase potential of investments in IT sector. This is decreased income tax and profit tax to 5%. Of course, this can attract international IT corporations or Georgian market, and we definitely see increased interest from IT community in Georgia, and this is, of course, fundamental for our digital development process. As regards investments, let me reiterate that strong interest of Georgian government is inviting more Austrian companies and, of course, Austrian investments in our country. FDIs from Austria into Georgian economy in 2021 was not very high figure, but there is higher potential. It was around $6 million since 1997, FDIs from Austria amounted $360 million, and there we see bigger potential of attracting investments from Austria.
Levan Davitashvili highlighted the energy sector as one of the priorities of the government to develop in Georgia and welcomed any investor activity in the sector.
We consider two flagship projects with the European Union. This is Black Sea submarine cable for data connectivity. Plus, we consider important flagship project, direct electricity connectivity with Romania that will, of course, boost energy, especially renewable energy generation in our country. And of course, these are also incentives for investors to consider energy sector as one of the priorities. Of course, it's very important for us when we talk about electricity to reduce dependence on neighbor countries and, of course, increase resilience. Government will consider potential investments to further strengthen energy independence in a fiscally sustainable manner. We are in the process of negotiating with our international financial institutions, with our friends and colleagues, new measures to promote additional investments in renewable energy generation. We are committed to strengthen our role as the EU reliable energy transit partner, supplier of green energy and key actor of transport tax system.
Now, let us take a brief look at very recent trade statistics for Georgia. In January-April 2022, the external merchandise trade was around 33% higher to the same period of 2021. The exports grew by almost 33%, while the imports grew by around 34%. The share of the negative trade balance in external trade turnover stood at almost 40%. In January-April 2022, the share of the top 10 trading partners by exports in the total exports of Georgia amounted to around 77%. The top partners were China, Azerbaijan, and Russia. In the same period, the share of the top 10 trading partners by imports in the total imports of Georgia amounted to 66%. The top partners were Turkey, Russia, and China. At the same time, the share of the top 10 trading partners in the total external trade turnover of Georgia amounted to around 68%. The top trading partners were Turkey, China, and Russia. Copper ores and concentrates reclaimed the first place in the list of top export items, equaling almost 23% of total exports. The share of ferroalloys in the total exports amounted to around 12%. The motor cars exports occupied the third place, constituting around 8% of the total exports. The top import commodities in January-April 2022 were petroleum and petroleum oils, constituting around 9% of the total imports. Motor cars followed in the list with almost 9% of imports, and the copper ores and concentrates were third in the top import commodity list with around 7% of imports. And one more very significant statistic I want to share with you today is the indicators of the labor force. In the first quarter of 2022, the unemployment rate in Georgia decreased by 2.5 percentage points compared to the corresponding period of the previous year and equaled 19.4%. The labor force participation rate, that's the share of the labor force in total population aged 15 and older, increased by 1.6 percentage points compared to the corresponding period of the previous year and became 49.9%, while the employment rate increased by 2.5 percentage points and amounted to 40.2%. The labor force participation rate in urban settlements increased by 0.8 percentage points and by 2.7 percentage points in rural settlements compared to the previous year. The employment rate in urban settlements as well as in rural areas increased by 2.8 4.2 and 2.9 percentage points, respectively. In the first quarter of 2022, the share of hired employees among employed persons was 68.1%, which is 1.2 percentage points lower compared to the corresponding period of the previous year. At the same time, the unemployment rate in urban settlements decreased by 3.1 percentage points compared to the corresponding period of the previous year, while in rural settlements it decreased by 1.5 percentage points. Traditionally, the unemployment rate is higher for men than for women. In the first quarter of 2022, compared to the corresponding period of the previous year, this indicator decreased for women by 2.2 percentage points, while it decreased by 2.7 percentage points for men. The labor force participation rate is higher for men than for women. In the first quarter of 2022, the indicator for women was 39.1% and for men 62.5%. The labor force participation rate for women increased by 0.9 percentage points, while for men it increased by 2.5 percentage points compared to the corresponding period of the previous year. In the first quarter of 2022, the employment rate for women as well as for men increased by 1.6 and 3.6 percentage points, respectively, compared to the corresponding period of the previous year. The only way to ensure stable and inclusive employment is to have a strong private sector. Let us have a brief overview of the business week in the scope of the checkpoints.
Georgian confectionery can replace Russia-Ukrainian products, said Saba Mamaladze, head of sales at Sandomi. As he noted, the war in Ukraine has significantly changed the situation in their sector. The Georgian market is trying to offset the lack with local production. That's why the shortage of sweets from both Russia and Ukraine has increased their productivity and sales. Imports from Ukraine have been suspended due to the war, and transactions from Russia have become complicated. So there is a shortage of confectionery products from these two countries on the Georgian market. We are now feeling the deficit in stores. Our sales increased by about 30–40% in this April compared to the same period of the last year, Saba Mamaladze explained. Confectionery manufacturer Assortiware has opened an European standard milk processing plant in Tsalka-Kvemukartli region. The company will replace the imported products in the production and will use only its own dairy products. In particular, high percentage butter, sour cream, cottage cheese and raw milk will be made on the spot. Emiratian cheese and sulguni will be sold in Assortiware branches. Confectionery company Assortiware owns a total of 8 branches. Irakli Tavartkiladze, the head of restaurant Veranda Akropoli, declares that restaurant prices are increased by about 20–30% in Batumi. As he explains, the reason for this is the growth in price for local and imported products. Utility bills, as well as fuel, are increasing in price. Consumers will meet price increase of 20–30% in our region, probably everywhere this year. The minimum price for Georgian products has been increased by about 10–15%. As for the imported ones, price growth totals to over 20–30%. Tavartkiladze said. According to him, the shortage of staff remains a significant challenge in the restaurant segment. The challenge is to find waiters, cooks or technical staff, but their salaries have also increased a lot. They will meet the increased salary of 30–40% in the restaurant sector, Tavartkiladze said. Norwegian salmon produced in Georgia will appear on the market from 2023. Guria Fish Farming is going to invest 20 million GLR in Shekwatili. The project is being implemented in 5 stages, after which the farm will produce more than 5,000 tons of salmon. After the finish of the first phase, the farm will receive 700 tons of salmon. As Vano Doborchkinidze, director of Guria Fish Farming, told BMG, in addition to the local market, the company plans to enter the eastern countries. Silk Hospitality CEO Yordikuit, which represents Radisson hotel chain in Georgia, notes that the hotel occupancy is up 75% at this stage, which is a pretty good figure given the global situation. However, earlier people made reservations 3 months before the arrival. Now they book a hotel 1 week in advance. The CEO of the company predicts that they will return to the pre-pandemic level next year. They expect tourists from Armenia and Azerbaijan along with local ones during this season. Silk hospitality hotels and entertainment facilities are located in Tbilisi, Batumi and Tsinandali. A new branch of fish and chips is opened in Tbilisi. The food outlet combines British cuisine and the company's main line is fish and chips. As Marina Merabishvili, the founder of Fish and Chips, told BMG, the facility mainly serves foreigners, in particular British and American customers. According to her, the facility can host 25 people at the same time. Customers can taste soups and other dishes in addition to fish and chips. As for the prices, they range from 16 to 30 GLR. It should be noted that the first food outlet of fish and chips is located in Saburtalo district and it offers customers only delivery service. The company uses imported as well as local raw materials in the production. Georgian Swiss company Blaustein Georgia, which produces meat and meat products, will open a moving meat shop in Tbilisi after Ambroulauri. Moving vehicles equipped with modern technology, refrigerators, storage rooms and equipment needed for this stuff will appear in Tbilisi soon. According to the director of Blaustein Georgia, the company has already submitted an application for a permit to Tbilisi City Hall. The company Blaustein Georgia was founded in 2009 with Georgian-Swiss investment of 80 million GLR in Russia. Meat with QR code will be sold in the market. The National Food Agency will hand over relevant technical equipment to slaughterhouses across the country. Unlike labeling, retailers themselves determine whether their products will have a QR code or not. The QR code will allow the customer to obtain additional information about the animal's place of origin and other data through the mobile application. Placing meat on the market with QR code is a proven practice in developed countries and from today it's already possible in Georgia. Sarabkhana is going to open its first showroom in Dubai. Nicholas Nakopia, chairperson of supervisory board of the company, declares that opening of new showrooms was also planned in London and Ukraine, but implementation of this project was delayed due to the start of hostilities in Ukraine. As for London, it has been replaced by Dubai market. Sarabkhana uses natural and precious stones to make golden and silver jewelries. The company makes over 11,000 items in a year. Sarabkhana has been operating in Georgia since 1939.
Senior policy advisor to the Secretary of State, Councillor Derek Shole, visited Tbilisi this week. Earlier to his visit to Tbilisi, Councillor of the department led an interagency delegation to Chisinau, Moldova. He met with Moldovan government officials to discuss the impact of the war in Ukraine on Moldova, continuing discussions of 30-year US-Moldovan partnership under the framework of the strategic dialogue, and met with refugees fleeing Russia's war against Ukraine. Councillor Shole's visit reinforced US support for Moldova's democracy, prosperity and security. Councillor Shole then traveled to Tbilisi, Georgia from May 18 to 19 to consult with Georgian partners about European security and democratic development. He met with government, opposition and civil society representatives for discussions on Russia's continuing occupation of parts of Georgia, on the Kremlin's brutal war against Ukraine, and on how to advance the people of Georgia's aspirations for democratic, peaceful, prosperous and Euro-Atlantic future. After concluding his visit in Georgia, Councillor Shole then traveled to London, the United Kingdom, to meet with UK partners to discuss joint efforts to address shared global priorities, including Euro-Atlantic security in light of Russia's war of aggression on Ukraine and the continued close cooperation in the Indo-Pacific. During his official visit, Councillor Shole met representatives of the Georgian government, members of opposition political parties and civil society leaders to discuss how US and Georgia can work together to help Georgia build a strong, secure and prosperous democracy. Let us now see how Georgia is positioned on the world democracy map. For this, we will need to turn to the most recent EIU Democracy Index 2022. Globally, almost 8 billion people live under a wide variety of political and cultural circumstances. Those circumstances can be measured. The sliding scale is between the free and not free, with the subtext that democracy lies on the one end and authoritarianism on the other. According to the Democracy Index report by the Economist Intelligence Unit, EIU, the state of democracy around the globe is at its lowest point since the index began in 2006, blamed in part on the pandemic restrictions that saw many countries struggling to balance public health with personal freedom. In this year's report, the EIU reported a drop of the average global score from 5.37 to 5.28, the biggest drop since 2010 after the global financial crisis. This translates into a sobering fact: only 46% of the population is living in a democracy of some sort. Now let's dig deeper. The region, Middle East and Central Asia, concentrates a substantial number of countries classified as authoritarian regimes. In fact, the region's overall democracy score is now lower than what it was before the start of the Arab Spring in 2010. There are no countries falling under the category of full democracy in this region. Only Israel and Cyprus are considered flawed democracies. Turkey, Georgia, Armenia, and Pakistan fall under the category of hybrid regimes, and the rest of the countries in the region are considered authoritarian regimes. Hybrid regimes are nations where electoral fraud or irregularities occur regularly, pressure is applied to political opposition, corruption is widespread, and rule of law tends to the weak. Media is pressured and harassed. There are issues in the functioning of governance. North America, Canada, and the US is the top-ranked region in the Democracy Index with an average score of 8.36, but this dropped significantly from 8.58 in 2020. Both countries have dropped their positions in the global ranking. However, Canada still maintains the status of a full democracy. The US is still classified by the EIU as a flawed democracy and has been since 2016. The report points to extreme polarization as the key issue facing the country. On the bright side, political participation in the US is still very robust compared with the rest of the world. Flawed democracies are nations where elections are fair and free, basic liberties are honored but may have issues. There are issues in the functioning of governance. In 2021, Western Europe is the region with the most full democracies in the world. In fact, 4 out of the top 5 full democracies are in this region: Norway, Finland, Sweden, and Iceland. Full democracies are nations where civil liberties and fundamental political freedoms are respected. Valid systems of governmental checks and balances exist. There are limited problems in democratic functioning. Media is diverse and independent. Eastern Europe paints a different picture, where there is not a single full democracy. 3 countries, Moldova, Montenegro, and North Macedonia, were upgraded from being considered hybrid regimes to flawed democracies. Ukraine's score declined, becoming a hybrid region. Russia's score also declined, keeping the authoritarian regime status. It is important to note here that this report by the EIU was published before the invasion of Ukraine began, and the war will almost certainly impact scores in next year's report. Authoritarian regimes are nations where political pluralism is non-existent or limited. The population is ruled by absolute monarchies or dictatorships. Infringements and abuses of civil liberties are common. Elections are not fair or free if they occur at all. Media is state-owned or controlled directly or indirectly by the ruling regime. The judiciary system is not independent. Criticism of the government is censored. It is easy to see that for individuals and businesses, the better space is either full democracy or even flawed democracy. Only in this case can individuals and businesses, like I will be showcasing until we say goodbye for the next week, thrive. Georgian company Lumiere Chimney Cake has operated on the Georgian market since 2018. It offers its customers Europeans' favorite sweet, the Czech Trdelnik. The founder of Lumiere first tasted the sweets at the age of 18 during his trip to the Czech Republic, Prague, and immediately decided to start this business in Georgia. The outdoor grill business now unites 4 branches. Moreover, Lumiere has already left the capital and a new facility has been opened in Kutaisi. In the future, the company intends to expand its brand in the Middle East as well. Let us see what's made in Georgia.
The first investment was my last salary, about $300 US. With that, we bought a white table. My father made a grill for 150 Georgian lari. Strips of dough were rolled into a cylinder. It's called turtle dough and baked over the grill. We did a small advertisement and that was all.
This is how the first confectionery producer in Georgia, Trdelnik, started operating on the market, which now unites 4 branches in Tbilisi. The founder of Lumiere Chimney Cake traveled to Prague at the age of 18. The taste of the famous local sweets was so delightful that he shared his desire to start the business in Georgia with his father. The desire turned into a family business in 5 years. Outdoor business was not an easy start, and the first look of Lumiere was much different than that of today's.
The first place where we started baking Trdelniks was in Treta. We rented a small space in the open air. We took inventory here every day and spent over an hour on their arrangement. Then, at the end of the day, we put everything in the car again, and this continued for a month. Unfortunately, during this period, the locals expressed dissatisfaction, so we had to leave. And in 2018, we opened the first branch in Pushkin Street 25.
The distinctive recipes have one and the most important thing in common: real cinnamon, the aroma of which can be felt when approaching any branch of Lumiere. Here is used only cinnamon bought in one of the poorer villages of Indonesia. The taste and smell of cinnamon is the business card which attracts customers.
The recipe belongs entirely to my father. He is the person who works on the product development. When I told my father that I tasted Trdelnik in the Czech Republic and offered to do the same once, my father's answer was that maybe we could do better. Therefore, if you go to the mother countries of Trdelnik, Czech Republic, Hungary, and taste Trdelnik, you will not meet the taste that we have here.
Lumiere, intended for tourists, soon became a favorite place for locals, spreading past Tbilisi and arriving in Kutaisi as well.
We did not open many branches during this period because we were working for the locals. When we made sure that the locals liked it, so that they went from Gldani district to Pushkin Street to taste them, that was when we decided to open new branches on Lisi Lake, Chevchavadze Avenue, and then in Kutaisi.
What does not change is quality and respecting customer choices. If prices on the market stay stable, it will be easy for the family business to enter Middle East markets.
Well, this is all for today. We'll see each other next Sunday. Before then, follow us on BM.G and Forbes.G and support Georgia and Ukraine.
The Checkpoint is presented by GM Pharma, the first international multinational pharmaceutical company in Georgia. GM Pharma, to serve those who need it most.